Hi folks, welcome back. And we've got several questions here that we're going to get started on. They just sent these over to me today. Let's take a look and see what we got. The first one is Brian asks, testosterone of Valasta. Sam, I'm 69 years old in good health except I have prostate cancer with a PSA of 26. By the way, that's too high for someone 69 years old. But been on Valasta for 3 months and we'll get a blood test next week. Have taken testosterone cypionate for the last 20 years. Weigh 200 pounds, 6'8", tall and thin. With that dose over the last years, my T levels stay around 110, which is a little low. Without testosterone, my neuropathy and bones deteriorate. And they will. But keep in mind of a couple things. First of all, prostate cancer of 26 is too high. It's indicative of an inflammatory response in your prostate, either from inflammation or from cancer. So it is something that you want to monitor pretty carefully. You also want to run a alkaline phosphatase. And if that number is above 120, then we need to get it under control pretty quickly. I don't know how much Valasta you're taking, but if your alkaline phosphatase is high, your CRP is high, your PSA is high, those would indicate a fairly substantial increase in dose for at least 2 weeks. Typically at 200 pounds, you should be taking a minimum of 100 milligrams every day. So keep that in mind. It's not unusual for your testosterone levels to drop. Prostate cancer is, it depends on the type and the rate at which it progresses, but it is something you want to watch very, very carefully, and don't let it get into your bones. The Valasta will help keep that away. Joan asks, Keytruda, Rozlytrek, and Valasta. Thank you so much for your response to my question on dosing. To answer your question regarding his return of cancer, he had a biopsy in the lining right lung that revealed cancer. He had been getting labs quarterly to measure his ctDNA. In April, it went from 0.42 to 1.43. He also has had a tumor removed behind his right eye. It was discovered after he began having double vision. They did not biopsy, but did radiation, which resolved the double vision. My question now is, he's been on Keytruda and Rozlytrek, both caused severe side effects, and had to be discontinued. They now want to start him on Xalkori. Since he is now taking 15 pumps of Valasta, are there any concerns for him taking both? To answer that question, no, there isn't. They'll both work synergistically together. One will not cancel out the other. He's been feeling much better since just being on Valasta and has concerns about starting a new therapy. These are things that you just want to watch and monitor. And I'm interested to know about the pathology of the tumor that was removed behind his right eye. And it could have been a problem with the maxillary sinus, a sinus infection that moved into his up behind his right eye, put pressure on the optic nerve and gave him double vision. In that regard, radiation probably would not have been recommended. But let's keep monitoring this. There's no interaction between the Valasta and these immunotherapy drugs. Keytruda and Opdivo both were developed from the activity that they saw in research from astaxanthin. So Keytruda and Opdivo, immunotherapy drugs, Rozlytrek, they attack the PD1 of the cancer, and so does the Valasta. So they're going to work synergistically. Harold asks, radiation and Valasta. My friend has HER2 negative breast cancer, stage 2. No lymph nodes, had cancer. She has had 7 rounds of chemo, but had to stop because side effects were horrible. Now she is told by her doctor to get radiation in that affected breast. Can she hold off on radiation and take Volasta and closely monitor the status of the cancer to make sure it doesn't return? She can hold off, and if the cancer in her breast either stabilizes and begins to decrease, then she's going to win this battle without having the need for radiation. What tests should be done on a regular basis to monitor the cancer? There's a few. The HSCRP is one. The other one is a CA15-3. The cancer antigen test 15-3 is one that would indicate if the number begins to increase dramatically. We want to look at the slope of that curve. But normal breast cancers breast cells will produce CA15-3. When cancer arises, it accelerates that number. Also, when cancer cells die, and this is very, very important, when cancer cells die, you may see an acute increase in that CA15-3. Doesn't mean your cancer is growing, it means your cancer is actually dying. Now what will happen is it will spike, and then over about a 2-week period you'll see a rapid drop in it. That means that your cancer has been killed, the cells are being cleaned up, and the cancer antigens are being eradicated. She asked her doctor to do a CRP test, and he wanted to know why. This is so common. And the reason is that, first of all, the layperson is not supposed to know about the CRP test. And the reason is because when they run your CRP test, they're going to find that most people in the United States and in most countries are operating in an oxidative stressed condition. Their CRP numbers will be elevated. Well, it creates anxiety in the patient because they want to know what's going on and is there a pill I can take to get that number down. The doctors don't have a pill. They can give you steroids, which is really frowned upon for chronic use anymore. So they don't even want to run the test because they don't want to have to explain that there's no real treatment for it, and they don't want the increased anxiety in their patient. But we now have something that works, and the Volasta will knock that number down. The doctors are unaware of that, so it may require some explaining to the doctor. And basically all you have to say to the doctor is, I want to know my inflammatory disease state. And he'll tilt his head, check the box, and you can get your CRP. Always remember, your doctor works for you. You do not work for your doctor. Question 4, if she decides to do radiation, how much Volasta does she need to take? Depends on her body weight, but if it's radiation, she's going to be saturated with a very high concentration of reactive oxygen species. And she's going to run the risk of having burns probably on her back when the radiation comes through her back. There may be a red mark that will show. But now that we have this patent, the patent was granted in November, where Volasta is now being used to mitigate radiation toxicity in not only in radiation treatments for cancer, but for space travel. And what we find is that people that are on Volasta and get radiation don't get the secondary burns associated with radiation. And I would highly recommend that you go on that regimen prior to getting your radiation. We also find that people who take Volasta and are on fairly high concentrations, they don't sunburn. And that was one of the very first indications we saw, was people who typically would go out in the sun, fair-skinned, they would get sunburned, and when they go on Volasta, they no longer burn. That was a major game changer for the health and the cases of melanoma or basal cell carcinoma reductions. Ruth asks, hormone, cholesterol, weight gain, colon issues. I'm not sick and have not been diagnosed with any disease, and I have a thyroid. I'm 57 years old, 5'3", weigh over 200 pounds. I went through menopause in my late 40s and post-menopause around 52 years old. I gained over 60 pounds during that time frame. I started taking bioidentical hormones, and it really helped stabilize the hormone imbalance and weight gain. The weight gain subsided while on BioT, but never a loss no matter how hard I try. Due to job loss recently, I had to postpone getting the pellets injected. Since I had to wait, I thought, why not try life without BioT pellets? It has been a challenge, but after a year without the hormones, I feel just fine, other than the fact that my weight has taken a big jump again. I am now at 210. Heart disease and colon issues run in my family, and that is my biggest concern as I get older. I had a colonoscopy about 2 years ago, and the doctor found a big abscess. He described it like a pimple that had burst and was pulsating pus out of it. He put me on antibiotics and told me I would be good to go until my next colonoscopy. Will Valasta help with the hormone imbalance, high cholesterol, weight gain, and any issues that I may have with my colon? This, believe it or not, is more common than people like to admit. So let's deal with the hormone issues. The hormone issues are caused primarily from an oxidative stress condition, a lack of glutathione, and SOD. SOD is superoxide dismutase formation in women over the age of 42. So you're right in that category, and the blood test needs to include your HSCRP. Your doctor will ask you why you want that test. Just tell them you want to know your inflammatory disease state, and they'll run it. That number should be less than 3 milligrams per liter on your blood work. If it's greater than that, then you're going to continue with these types of inflammatory diseases. When you stated at the top, I am not sick and have not been diagnosed with any disease, you are sick if your CRP is greater than 3. So it's all in the definition as to how we classify this. Having high cholesterol is also a disease, and I'm going to go through that. But in the bottom here, will Valasta help with hormone imbalance? It will. It will stop the inflammatory response resulting from the new homeostasis that you're about to reach, the new equilibrium your body is headed for. So we want to mitigate that. High cholesterol. The high cholesterol is probably, in your case, coming from fruit. You need to cut all fruit out of your diet. And weight gain is also a part of that. When you eat high concentrations of fruit or anything containing fructose, that includes bread, fruit, sodas, sugar, your cholesterol is going to go sky high. And the reason is, they call it the cop's disease, but cops spent too much time in donut shops. They always had a problem with their triglyceride levels. And then the liver converts the triglycerides into LDL cholesterol, which causes heart disease, cancer, insulin resistance. So, a couple things. No more fruit in your diet. Cut it completely out. No fruit juices, no sodas, no potato chips, nothing that would contain any form of sugar or cholesterol. We're going to do that until your weight gain begins to start to come down. You don't have to change anything else, just do that. Take Valasta, and at your current weight, you want to take at least 100 milligrams a day. I would prefer 120 to get you over this hump, and then we'll be able to reduce the dose. The weight gain is coming from insulin resistance. The same thing about the fruit and the high cholesterol is causing the weight gain. So your insulin is misfolded, and it's misfolded because of your stress level. We'll be able to see that with your C-reactive protein. If that number is greater than 3, then you're going to continually have a problem with insulin resistance until you will be headed into a diabetic issue. Your colon issues are probably coming from fructose. Fructose cannot be used by a single cell in your body. It is a poison. Always has been, always will be. So when you consume high levels of fruit, it gets into your colon, it ferments. The bacteria in your gut uses the fruit just like yeast uses sugar to make wine and beer. It produces, unfortunately, it doesn't produce ethanol, it produces aldehydes. And the aldehydes are inflammatory in your colon, and it will cause lesions in your colon, causes a severe inflammatory response with diarrhea. Your LDL levels will increase, which is what's going to lead to heart disease. So these are all bad habits that we need to overcome. I don't know what your diet is, but I can tell from the way that you're describing it here that probably what I'm telling you is going to have a pretty major impact in your life changes. So Ruth, stay in touch with me and let me know, but as far as the protocol, no more sugar, at least for 30 days. No fruit, no fructose, nothing that contains high fructose corn syrup. You can eat meat and potatoes. The glycogen or the starch that's in potatoes is fine. There's no fructose in it. Glucose is the sugar that's used by every cell in your body. Fructose is not used by a single cell in your body. There's no reason for us to do it, and it is a poison. It was introduced into our food supply in 1966. Since then, all these inflammatory diseases are 92% of what will put us in the grave. And I hope that helps a little. Chadley asks, PD1 drug, Ivermectin and Velasta. This was an interesting article. I've read a few things on Ivermectin since the whole COVID situation. Unfortunately, it was and still is so political that I don't think doctors are giving it a fair shake in different ways. This article goes into how Ivermectin and anti-PD1 drug combined. PD1 drugs are like Keytruda, they're chemo drugs. Opdivo, Yervoy, was having a 40 to 60% cancer killing rate. What was most interesting to me was that it was basically allowing the body to defend and destroy the cancer itself by reducing the cancer's ability to be resilient to drugs or the host's own immune system. These two drugs together created an ICD which stimulated the host immune system. Interesting, because there's a few folks that believe cancer could be a type of parasite, and ivermectin is incredibly powerful against parasites. Would Velasta be considered an anti-PD1 drug? If one were to take ivermectin and Velasta together, would this be a combination that this article is talking about? Perhaps. This is very interesting. Chadley, I don't know you and you really don't know me, but I can tell you that I do take ivermectin and Velasta together. And there's a real good reason for doing it. Ivermectin is an anti-parasitic, and the way it kills the parasites is it destroys the microtubules inside the cell. Microtubules in cancer cells, these are the superhighways that allow the dyneins, the little two-legged robots, to carry bags of sugar, amino acids, proteins into the nucleus so that the cancer cell can continue on with its immortal existence. Now, cancer cells will have 100 times more microtubules inside its cell than a normal cell does. So, a PD1 inhibitor, Velasta is a PD-L1 inhibitor. And what that means is the Velasta reacts with the end of the PD-L1 on the tumor cell. And that's called a tyrosine amino acid. It's a carboxylic acid group. So if this is the astaxanthin coming down, it sees the tyrosine sticking up out of the cell membrane of the tumor cell. Keytruda does the same thing, except it does it on the PD1 of the T cell. But on the PD-L1, of the tumor cell. The astaxanthin sticks to it, and it inhibits it. So that reactive site on the end of the PD-L1 of the tumor cell is totally ineffective. Now, when the T cell comes down, it has PD1s. So it comes down and it searches through all the bacteria looking for debris, checks every cell several times a day. Every single cell in your body is looked at, all the debris is picked up. Well, if the PD1 of the T cell touches the PD-L1 of the tumor cell, the T cell runs away. That's the defense mechanism of cancer. But if the PD-L1 is inhibited by astaxanthin, this thing cannot make contact with it. It's blocked. The T cell then comes down, attaches to the cancer cell, and kills it within 4 seconds. It's very, very quick when you look at it under a microscope. So that's where PD1 and PD-L1 come in, and you'll see it in some of the videos that I've done. The ivermectin, when I was talking about the microtubules, because it works on parasites, it doesn't mean cancer comes from a parasite. It does not. The parasite can cause an inflammatory response that mutates the DNA of a cell that can result in cancer, but cancer is not a parasite. So, but the way that ivermectin works, and hydroxychloroquine does the same thing, these things go in, and the microtubules that are inside the cell that allow the dienes to carry proteins to the nucleus, that's what they walk on. And the ivermectin unravels the microtubule, the superhighways. It destroys them. In parasites, they have, in their cells, they have a huge network of microtubules. The reason ivermectin works is because it destroys those microtubules. The cells cannot get nutrients to the nucleus, and the cells die. Normal cells also have microtubules, and those normal cells can be affected by ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, but it's not to the same extent because of the sheer number statistically of microtubules in cancer cells compared to normal cells. So it will preferentially go after those microtubules and have a much greater effect on killing the cancer. So when you take Volasta and ivermectin, it's a double kill on the cancer cell. It kills, it's actually triple. The Volasta will inhibit the PD-L1 of the cancer cell, allowing your T cells to kill the cancer cell. The glucosidic astaxanthin migrates intracellular into the cell, and it will neutralize, it will convert the hydroxyl free radical from a 0 charge, having a pH of about 5 or 5.5, it's acidic, to a pH up over 11 inside the cancer cell, thereby killing the cancer cell. And then the third mechanism is the ivermectin, where you mechanically go in and destroy the microtubules of the cancer cell. And when that happens, then the cell becomes dysfunctional. This is why ivermectin works on viruses, because it kills the reproduction of the virus inside the cell by eliminating the microtubules which the cell needs to replicate viruses. I hope that makes sense, but from a biochemical point of view, that's what's happening. So in summary, take Volasta and ivermectin both. You've got a 3-fold increase of killing the cancer cell. So these articles, although the conclusions, I'm not sure that they've come to the proper conclusions, but from a biochemical point of view and from a cellular point of view, it's very easy to understand why it's working the way it works. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close. Keep sending the questions in. These are great questions, and it gives us some ammunition to go in and ask the doctor these questions. Have him confirm that you have cancer and not just an infection. So with that, I'm going to close and wait for the next batch. Thank you very much.